So, welcome all. We've just finished recording another podcast, which is an interesting discussion. I think we're getting better at these. There's a lot we talked about and a lot that I wanted to go into, but because of the discussion that we went through, we weren't able to get through all of it. So it just means another podcast for us all. What we went through is we went and discussed the practicalities of the remote work revolution. We then touched on the human experience and a little bit around what we called the remote work tax. And there were some interesting insights there in terms of there's one person on this podcast who said they'd take a pay cut if it was working from home. So tune in close to the end to find out who that actually is. Before I let you guys into our sanctuary of conversation, I would like to thank our sponsors for making this happen. TUANZ, thank you, Craig, for believing in us. And giving us this opportunity, as well as FLINT, who's the organization that we actually all are part of. I also want to thank our fabulous sound sponsors in Tudo for giving me this great mic and making me sound as good as I do. So with that, I hope you guys enjoy the conversation. Kia ora, welcome to podcast 3. This has been a bit of a journey for us, so super excited to have number 3 recorded and ready to go for you guys. Today we've got a bit of a great episode. I've been talking to a few of the supporters and they've definitely given their tick of approval. So today we're going to be talking about the remote work revolution. I've got my dear friends Caitlin and Derek here. We'll kick straight into it and we'll go through a bit of a definition at first because I want to define remote work in comparison to working from home. Quite often it's used interchangeably, but for the purposes of this podcast, I see remote work as more a borderless work from anywhere, work from Machu Picchu, work from Colombia, and still do the same job. So defined, it's more so working outside of your central hub. Whereas I see remote work, or I see work from home as more being working from your house and having a bit of an office setup. So I just wanted to make that definition right at the start. So as we're going through this, we understand that it's broader than just I get to work from home and make myself a personal coffee. So with that being said, let's kick straight into it. And I want to get into the practicalities of remote work. Some people would argue that remote work makes you more productive. Other people would say it's actually less productive. I want to throw to you, Derek. Give me your opinion on where you stand in regards to the productivity debate.
For sure. So I think this is incredibly subjective on the personal experience of the individual. So if you are a person that really values focused time, not being connected to a large group of people, but are able to just sit in a room and focus, then remote work is for you. But if you are in the category of learning from others, because that's me, because I believe who you know is what you know. So if you're in that category, remote work doesn't work for you. So you really have to introspect and determine it. So it's a varied answer. Depends, really.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm going to throw straight to you, Caitlin, to get your thoughts on it as well before I chip in with my 2 cents.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Derek on that one. And I also think it greatly relies on the type of work that you're doing. I don't know about you guys, but in my role, there's a lot of variety in the terms of actual task types. So there's some things where hunkering down for a couple of hours, staring at my screen and not talking to anyone is what I need to get whatever I'm doing done. But then there are some really collaborative aspects of my role where it's so much easier to do it with people around or with the people in the room with you instead of on a call. I'm trying to share documents and things and all that jazz. And yeah, I know that some of our more technical team members love being at home because they can just get on with it, no distractions. They can just keep powering through. And then some of our more like our support team and things really like being around people because you can bounce ideas off of each other really easily. And if you get off a hard phone call, there's someone to to complain about it too and rinse that stress off your back really quickly. So yeah, type of work and type of person comes into play a lot, I think.
Yeah. No, definitely. So I'm along the similar lines there in terms of like, if I talk from personal experience, being in a sales role, it's a lot more about relationships. So when I do go into the office, I do quite enjoy getting out and about and meeting my customers. And there's nothing like seeing someone in person. But at the same time, when I'm in the office, I'm personally one of the people that gets a bit more distracted, in the sense that I tend to get distracted and talk about sport quite a bit and have a bit of banter here and there with the few people that do come into the office when I'm there. But in saying that, those are the sorts of conversations that you get the creative ideas. And I'm always saying that when I'm not talking and when I'm listening to someone else is when I actually learn something new. Whereas when I'm talking, I'm kind of just regurgitating stuff that I already knew, sort of thing. So I find a balance is good. Like in terms of, there are some times where I'm responding to RFPs where I just need to think and not, need to sit down, think, and not have anyone come and distract me and talk about the football that went on the weekend. But it really just depends. And I think the balance is quite important. It does get a bit boring sometimes at home, though. So with that, it kind of brings up the topic of communication and how the remote work revolution has changed the communication game. I find that with the example that I brought up in terms of responding to big RFPs, which are documents and you need multiple different people, in a perfect world, you'd have everyone in a room sitting together working on it in terms of my preferred communication style. But I'm keen to delve into some of the challenges you guys are finding with, or the pros, with communicating remotely with colleagues or with friends or with whatever. So Derek went first last time. I'm going to be democratic and give it to Caitlin now.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess, like most people, my first real remote work experience was during the lockdowns and things. We went from being fully in the office to being fully at home all the time. And like a lot of, especially technology companies did. And so that was a big switch. It was quite difficult to get into the rhythm. We used to have weekly meetings together with each of the teams to realign what we were doing for the week, go over what was working, what wasn't working, etc., etc. And we've got this ginormous orange whiteboard in our boardroom that ends up being a big higgledy-piggledy like scribble of ideas and brainstorms and connecting things and big arrows going all over the place, which is a really nice way of everyone getting everything out, and then we can kind of organize from there. And so switching to everyone being at home and meeting over a Zoom meeting or Teams or Google Meets or whatever we're using, we kind of lost that ability to really easily connect all of the ideas and collaborate and create that brain dump and then organize it. We started using Google Sheets and things so we could all throw down our ideas beforehand and then go through the list and yada yada, but it's just not quite the same, because it had to be much more structured to keep it organized and flowing. Otherwise we'd just be on a call for 3 hours and not really get anything done. And so yeah, I think we lost a bit of that ability to just get through things fast. And you've got a time limit on a online call or whatever it might be, but it can sometimes be really hard to stick with that if you're bouncing between people. Whereas yeah, in person, I don't know, things just seem to go a little bit quicker.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And in terms of like the whole dynamic of remote or of video conferences, like one person has the mic and you're listening and you can't really have a two-way conversation. Whereas if you've got a room of multiple people, like, I mean, here we've got 3 people on the call, but if you've got more than, I say, 5 people, then it makes it quite difficult for everyone to get a bit of a say. Whereas in a room, you could have like kind of side conversations, which some people call rude, but in terms of like collaborating and creativity, you can definitely get a lot more out of it. So Derek, keen to hear your thoughts on the whole communication. I know your work's a little bit different to myself and Caitlin, so interested to hear your perspective.
100%. So in-person communication is far superior than remote. And this is hands down because you get emotional, facial, body language cues to understand the person. It also allows you to be way more present. The amount of times that I'm in a meeting online and I myself am working in the background, or others are working, and then when their name is heard in the distance, then they're like, could you please repeat the question? You're not actually present in meetings. And so the remote work culture creates this illusion that you're busy, and you get this meeting fatigue from all these meetings that you have to go into, sitting and, like you said, hearing that one person talk or one person explain, and your ideas aren't going to be as communicated. So that's why. But on the contrary, if I was to argue that there is a psychological bias where if you're in a meeting room with everyone and some loud person is giving an idea, then you tend to agree towards them. So I think you may be able to reduce that in remote work if I'm being an advocate for it, but nah, in-person communication always superior.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Can I just jump in there really quickly on that note? Just speaking about the loud people in the room, that definitely is something that I think remote working does mitigate a little bit, because it's quite easy to throw it to somebody else and then it will be rude if they jump in like I just did. But at the same time, if people are remote, it can be much harder for them to jump in like I just did. So yeah, you might end up not having that one person speaking over everyone, but it might also make it harder for those other people to speak up, because they don't have a very easy way of just talking to everyone. They have to put their hand up in the little meeting prompt or interrupt somebody to get in there. So yeah, it's a bit of a balance.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, definitely is that double-edged sword in terms of, yeah, it can be a positive, but it's also potentially a negative. One of the things that Derek brought up in terms of the emotional connection, I quite liked, and I wanted to get into a little bit more of the tools. If you've seen any tools, most organizations do the standard Teams, Zoom, and they don't really put too much of an effort into other tools to enhance the communication, to mimic that emotional connection. And one of the things that I really think is quite important is giving all people a set of instructions or a set of best practices when being on video calls. One of the things that I find quite good, and I am not doing it now, is when organizations will have like a camera, and now you can probably tell that I'm looking at you guys rather than looking at the camera, which then quite often doesn't give you that same emotional connection than like looking into someone's eyes, and you can only build that connection. So I find a lot of the time when you're on Zoom calls, you're looking down at the people, but you're not actually looking, they're not looking at you. So in terms of some of the tools and that you've seen work, is there anything that you can think of? I'll go to you, Derek, in terms of some of the things that you found useful. And it's okay if you have nothing.
I mean, that's a very nuanced point that you just made about the emotional connection with eyes, because eyes do tell a lot. It is a bonding connection of love and emotion for sure. But I don't think it's as big of a problem as you put it. The fact that the camera is on is already a huge benefit in terms of that connection, because you're still seeing the person's physical cues. Though what gets me is you're in a Teams meeting and you're seeing a full icons with the initials as their names, or you're in a Zoom meeting and it's all just their icon and you're really speaking into the void, into nothing. I think that's far worse of a emotional connection experience. And it leads to the thing that I talked about earlier, where you're just going to phase off and do your own thing and not really pay attention or be present in the meeting. So I don't think that. But to answer your question, there is a tool which is called NVIDIA Broadcast, which it's an AI tool that locks your eyes onto the screen. So if you're looking elsewhere, then you're actually looking at the screen. It's that illusion. But honestly, I don't think you need to use it. Just put your cameras on is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, fair enough. Does that do it live, the NVIDIA broadcast? I know there are a bunch of editing tools where you can I've been meaning to talk to you about that in terms of seeing whether we can do it in terms of post-edit being locking the eyes, I think it is called.
Yeah, I think it's live, but I need to double check that.
Yeah, I will definitely hold you to that. So yeah, Caitlin, anything that you can think of in terms of tools?
Yeah, same with Derek. I don't probably use anything really. For me, a lot of the people I'm in meetings with, especially people external to my organization, are not super tech savvy for, I want to say for the most part, I'd say for maybe half of the meetings I go into. So just getting them onto an online call sometimes is the mission, and getting that successfully happening is great. And then I'm or they are presenting for the majority. So tiny icons in the side anyway, or not even be able to see them depending on kind of what tool we're using. So yeah, plus I'm also a little bit blind. So I honestly couldn't even tell you if you were looking at me or down a little bit. You're too small on the screen. There's no way I'm going to know that. As long as I can see your face and you're smiling and you're not like making a really grumpy expression when I say something, I'm cool.
That makes sense. And to be honest, that actually brings up an interesting point about inclusivity versus exclusivity in terms of, I guess, the remote work or working from home has brought in or has enabled a whole bunch of people who have physical or mobility impairments to be in the workforce. So seeing as you brought it up, I'm interested to know maybe talk a little bit more about your experiences in terms of how you found it, and also where you stand on the inclusivity versus exclusivity debate, and to broaden the remit a little bit. That also could touch on things like geographic location, in terms of now all of a sudden organizations have the ability to hire or get skilled resources from a whole bunch of different areas rather than just their 30-minute bubble, which I think is a reasonable commute time. So to pose the question in terms of where do you think the whole remote work revolution stands on the inclusivity and digital divide versus exclusivity? Do you think it's increased the digital divide, or do you think it's enhanced it? Keen to know where you stand on that.
Well, in terms of kind of disabilities and impairments and things, remote work has definitely improved people's ability to be working. I used to have a flatmate who had some chronic health issues and was given the opportunity to work completely remotely. And that just meant that they would be able to log in even on those days where getting out of bed or walking down to the bus stop and taking the bus into town wasn't possible, but they'd still be able to work and still be able to make a living. So yeah, in those kind of ways, for people that might have those mobility issues, or for some of our visual impairment or audio impairment people, we've got the things like the live translations, that's not what I'm saying, captions, translations as well. Everything like that really helps people that might not be able to hear or see or learn in the exact same ways as everybody else. So yeah, all of that stuff really does help. But in terms of hiring people overseas and having people as part of your team, that's also really great. That's something we've kind of been toying with the idea of, because we're getting a lot more customers overseas, and so we want to cover the wider time zone. And so at the moment we've just got someone here in New Zealand working a little bit later, but the end goal would be to have someone in Australia, in the US, in the UK, etc., working at those time zones, who can also go and meet with customers or just have that cultural kind of awareness and ability to connect that way as well, because there's only so much when we're out at the beach and someone in the UK is in like middle of snow, you can only relate so much to that. So yeah, we're definitely looking into it as an option. I'm not completely sure if there's anyone that's really doing it that I know of at the moment, but other than like the really massive companies that probably have bases all over the place. But yeah, I'm very excited about the opportunity of doing it in the future. So I think it's greatly increased the ability to do that for sure.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you're using that or looking to do that 24-hour model. I spoke about it a little bit, I think it was on podcast 1 or podcast 2, and like I've never seen it work quite well. So interested to know how you guys end up going with that. I just love the little clockwork. Someone wakes up, picks up. You obviously have to have good systems, but someone wakes up, picks up exactly where you left. You go play a game of golf, come back, and then pick it up again. Don't give me
Not
that
me.
look.
No golf here, no thanks.
I'll get you down to the driving range one time. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, Derek. I hope you can keep up. Rather than pose you the exact same question, I'm going to ask it in a slightly different way. In terms of climbing the ladder, in terms of the career ladder, do you think that if, say, Caitlin's organization was able to put together a 24-hour follow the sun model where they had people all over the place, do you think that in terms of climbing the career ladder, those sorts of people would be advantaged or disadvantaged in terms of not having, I say, FaceTime with the boss man, or not having the same ability to connect over coffee or lunch? So yeah, keen to hear your thoughts on where you stand on the climbing the ladder from home.
Totally. And in terms of career progression, I think you will be disadvantaged. It's the unfortunate case of the way humans interact with each other, how we perceive value, how we perceive productivity, and being present and seeing the person contribute or seeing the person engage with teammates and do that gives the leaders an understanding when it comes to the review period or the merit period. It's an unfortunate bias. Maybe we need to create better processes that allow remote work colleagues to get that same benefit by maybe doing it more on an objective based. But in all honesty, when you come to these merit reviews or promotions, you're sitting with your manager and your manager is like, oh, well, this is what you've done and I've seen you do this, so I can validate it. Rather than, oh, this is what you've done, but I haven't seen you do this. I don't have an emotional connection. Therefore, I'm not going to be as inclined to increase you. And so you will be disadvantaged, and it's the unfortunate situation. And I'm speaking from experience as well. There was this person, not my experience, but anecdotal experience, in the sense that there was this person that worked from home the whole time, but according to his colleagues, he was far more technical, far more productive working from home the whole time. But because he was not visible, his pay rise was not good compared to his other colleague who was not as technical, not as productive, but was in the office, communicating, collaborating. They got a higher pay rise. Maybe you could argue that the pay rise system or the method was broken, but I do believe you're disadvantaged. So
yeah, I had a mentor manager who used to always say, he was a big proponent of being in the office. And he had his reasons for it. I tended to agree with a lot of them, but I also disagreed with a bunch of them in terms of how you measured how you measured productivity, which you brought up. But the reason I brought him up in this example is he used to always say, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. So you wouldn't necessarily be thought about for certain stretch projects or activities, or even those social events where you find a lot of the networking and a lot of the feel-good factor when it comes to the rub of the green and the merit reviews comes in. So definitely tend to agree with you there, but I also would want to put the onus back on the organization when they promote and say, we're going to be a remote work organization and where you can work wherever you want and we're flexible working. A lot of the time they don't necessarily have the tools and systems in place to fairly judge or even make it seamless between someone who works remotely and someone who's in the office every day. I still think that's well, from what I've seen, a work in progress for a bunch of organizations. And I get that it's quite hard. One of the things that I heard a few months ago, which I disagreed with right at the start when I first heard it, but then I kind of thought about it and ended up being like, well, actually, I'd take the compromise. And that was organizations looking to have a work from home tax, or having a situation where they pay you in terms of, if you come into the office, you get paid slightly more to cover your commute or to cover your time Whereas if you worked from home, in terms of a policy, I'm keen to understand where you guys sit on that one, purely because it was one that I went, hell no, I don't want to do that. But then I kind of thought about it, and I'm still sitting on the fence. I'm hoping you guys can help me out with that. Caitlin looks like she's got something to say, so you can go first.
Yeah, so this has not been something like explicitly discussed in our office, but we've recently gone from 1 day compulsory in the office back up to 2. And so I think we've settled on a Tuesday and a Friday, but that second day is still not completely confirmed. And yes, a couple of the people were kind of like, oh, it's a whole nother day of having to pay for gas or pay for a bus or pay for a train or however they might get to work and get up a whole couple of hours earlier or whatever it might be. And I definitely tend to agree on that. But at the same time, I think you have to think about the quality of the work that comes from a good work-life balance. The days that I work from home, I get that extra bit of sleep in. I can go and sit out on my deck in the sun and have a slow breakfast in the mornings like I did before jumping on this Zoom call. And I come to where I've got my work set up and I feel really good and I'm productive right from the bat. Whereas when I go into the office, I have to have a cup of tea and a chat first, and then it's like, okay, how much of that time am I actually spending warming up to the day? Whereas when I sit down at 8:30 at home, I'm like working from the go. So I don't think there's really a way you can put a cost on the difference. Obviously, yeah, you have to commute and things, so it might be that you get a little bit extra for catering for your travel expenses, but then it's also when I'm at home, I'm using all of my own tea and milk and sugar and stuff for my cup of tea during the day. So am I going to get compensated for that, considering work are paying for everybody's that's at the office? And if they have a drink after work, am I going to get compensated for that glass of wine I missed because I'm at home? So it's like, sure, there's costs and expenses involved in both sides. So where do you draw that line? Is it just travel in? Is it all of those extra things? Like you use the office bathroom, so you're using all of their hand soap and toilet paper and stuff. Are you going to cost all of that and add that on? Like I don't think you can really do that in a way that's going to actually be fair for everybody.
I love that. I have thoughts on that, but I've already spoken my 2 cents, and I want to give Derek an opportunity before I do that. So Derek, same question posed to you.
For sure. I agree with Caitlin in the sense that it's going to be difficult to impose a tax, but I agree with the tax's incentive. And what I mean by that is if you tax someone that works remotely or works from home, then what you're essentially saying is that you need to come into the office more and you can earn more money. And what that would mean is it would reduce this barrier. And I believe it's a one-sided barrier, but I am privileged and in a phase in my life where I want to be in the office and I want to connect. So I'm going to acknowledge that. But I believe it's a one-sided level thinking that, oh, I'm going to commute and waste my time and waste my money, but don't see the benefits that you get from being in an office, being connected, and that sense of accomplishment and work and life. And that actually gives you a far better experience. And so the tax would incentivize people to come to the office, and then they will start realizing that their happiness, which is majority of their work life, majority of their life is work. And so if you need to make your work life happy, and then when you realize the people that you're surrounded by and how you work will then make you happy, it's a no-brainer. And you get past that, okay, I'll spend $4 or $8 on the commute. Yes, I'll waste an hour, but I get to come and see my teammates, or I get to really help this young kid on the block that's really passionate. And I'm 20 years in the developer or engineer or whatever industry you're in, and I get to pass that knowledge down. And even on a meta level, on a societal level, you're bringing more people into the city, which then reduces crime rates because you're going to get more active, flourishing economy. And so the benefits from a meta multi-level thinking are far superior than I want to do my washing at home. or I want to clock off at 3 on a Friday. Because really, that's what the remote work from home experience is giving us. So yeah, that's my sense, and it could be controversial and it's very strong-minded, but yeah, that it is.
No, I love it. And there's so many things we could go into there, but I'm going to ask you, Derek, a yes or no question based on your answer, and I want you to just give it to me straight. Would you take a pay cut if you were to work from home?
Yes.
Full stop. You would? Interesting. I hope your boss doesn't hear this, but that's all right. I want to move on a little bit in terms of talking about the human experience and something that's prevalent in our generation, and that's around the mental health and how remote work can impact our mental health, both good and bad, and striking a balance between work and life. I know Caitlin's touched on it a little bit, and so just keen to go into a little bit more specifics around the mental health perspective. And to kick things off, in my experience, I find that when I'm working from the office, I've got a bit more of a commute. It's a when I get stuck in traffic, it's about a 45 to an hour journey, which isn't too fun. So when I'm working from home, I find that a lot of the time, if I've got evening things, my mental health and my work-life balance is a whole bunch better, because I can get down for a game go down to the driving range every now and then, like straight after work, and not clock off at 3 p.m. as Derek seems to think I do. So in terms of the mental health experience and work-life balance, I'll go to Derek. Tell me where you stand.
I agree with the balance. You get more autonomy, you get more freedom of being able to have focus periods and have collaborative periods. So that's where I think the solution is hybrid. It's not fully be in the office 5 days pre-COVID. That's never going to work. And it's not fully remote, where you miss all the isolation and business intelligence and everything I was talking about. So it's that mix. And so the autonomy and the benefits that you get, and also being able to do your washing alongside working, or do a cook and clean and all that kind of stuff, which you can do, which then improves your work-life balance, because you're not having to do it after work or before work or even in the weekend. And so therefore increasing happiness and productivity. So I agree with the hybrid model.
Yeah. And I know Caitlin's spoken a little bit about it, but is there anything additional you want to add specifically in the mental health space?
Yeah, so Kais, I used to have a really big drive into the office when I first started this role. Now it was about an hour, 10 minutes each way, until I finally made the move across the bridge. And yeah, just thinking back to those days, I'd have to leave my house at 7:10 to make sure I was at work by 8:30, and leave at 5 and not get home until after 6, sometimes closer to 6:30. And that's 2 hours of my day gone. I was in nose to tail traffic the whole time, so it wasn't a great way to start the day or end the day. I was coming home and I'm like, cool, now I have to cook and go into the gym, or if I've got plans with friends, I'm like, oh, stress, blah blah blah. And so yeah, taking that out of the day, even for 2 days a week, that's 4 hours every week I've gotten back to do life stuff. And especially these days where, yeah, I'm working from home 2 or 3 days a week, depending on what we've got going on in the office. I think it's so beneficial, especially as the weather starts getting a bit warmer. Those days where I'm not feeling great, I can go get some sunshine, go for a walk at lunchtime or in the morning or straight after work or something, because I'm not spending that time in my car. Or if I've got some stuff that I haven't been able to do around the house on my lunch break, like you say, I can put that washing on, or I can do that quick vacuum, which I don't know about you guys, but makes me feel good, because now I'm living in a clean, nice environment. So I get that little boost. And yeah, being able to have the time to cook a fresh meal instead of having to take a container of leftovers or go and buy food for lunch and that kind of thing also helps boost that mental health. I'm eating healthier, I'm saving money at the same time, that kind of thing. So all of these little bits and pieces really help. And then it comes down to the, how do you recharge? Are you introverted or extroverted? People that prefer to recharge by themselves are going to have a much better time if they've got the ability to do those few days from home and recharge their batteries before they go into the office. And then the people that are extroverted still get that office time to recharge themselves before they have the couple of days at home that they might not love quite as much, but they'll have family around or their flatmates, or be able to go out and do more stuff after work because they've got more time. So they'll be able to get that social interaction to recharge themselves as well. And I think it can be isolating, and I completely understand how some people get that in their head, like, oh, you're by yourself at home, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's about taking the extra time and making sure you're doing something valuable with it instead of just sitting on the couch at home, which is definitely something I do sometimes as well. But yeah, you've got to use it to your advantage, that extra time and that little bit of extra money that you might get.
Yeah. And this time has actually gone super quick. There's a whole bunch of things that I want to go into, but I'll pose you each the last question. I'll come to you first, Caitlin. And is there one policy that you have that you'd like to see implemented, or you think would make a difference in terms of the remote work revolution? And then I'll throw straight to you, Derek.
I mean, what we've done is with setting specific days to be in the office, I think is great, because then you're not guessing who's going to be there or going in and being the only one there or anything like that. So I think that's really the way to do it. Everyone knows, cool, these are the days where we're going to have all that collaboration happening. This is when we book in our meetings, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, it's made it work really well for us. So I think more people should do it.
Cool. And straight to you, Derek.
I couldn't agree more with Caitlin. I don't think there's any more to add to that. I think that's the first step. Yeah.
Cool. But I guess to summarize, essentially, I feel like we're all on the standard where we believe hybrid work is the way to go. Where it's interesting is where we draw the line in terms of where we believe things will accelerate or society and the human race. So there's never a right answer with these things. It's all just a debate and an interesting conversation. I think there's a few things there that I'm going to go and ponder over the next 48 hours. So with that, thank you to all our supporters. Hope you enjoy this episode. Please like, subscribe, and yeah, we'll keep posting these things for you every month. Take care.